Hey guys, what is up? Kid here of Burn One, bringing you another deck profile. This time on Aggro Abyss. This is the final build I kind of landed on. There's like some minor changes you can make to suit your playstyle, but I think if you want to go all in on aggro game plan and just get your opponent down and losing the game on turns 5 and 6, this is the list to be playing. So let's get right into it. All right, so here is the list. It's pretty standard overall. You can make some minor changes if you want, like playing Bellringer Angel for having a little bit of an edge in the mirror match, for example. But if you like to go all in right from the start and plan to end your opponent's life on turn like 6, this is probably the list you want to be playing. So we'll just get right into it here with obvious one-drop your Ambling Wraith. This activates some of your Sanguine effects as well as, push damage on play. And then it's still a 2/1 body that can push damage early on. It's a decent one-drop. Next, Goblin, it's a one-drop 2/2. What more can you ask for? Skeleton Fighter, this guy, very powerful one-drop as well. Usually turn 2 if you're able to play Skeleton Fighter plus Ambling Wraith. That's a really powerful play. Just getting a one-drop 3/3 on the board is pretty good overall. And, having a one-drop early, even if you have to play this as a 2/2, is always good. We play 3 soul conversions this way so we can, find cards that we need. Get rid of Ambling Wraiths once we know they're useless, or for example, if your opponent tries to trade in, you can pop away on one of your followers to get better cards in your hand. A lot of times you're using this to dig for more gas, usually burn spells and stuff like that, in order to close out the game usually. Next here we have Demonic Hedonist. So this is a card I recently got put on. I really like it a lot because I found issues where I kind of want to dig for a second burn spell when I'm getting close to ending the game, and this card a lot of times would allow me to get like 1 or 2 extra draws out in a game depending on what the board state was like. So I really liked this card. So it has at the start, the end phase, if Sanguine is active for you, draw a card, then discard a card. We play 2 of the Evo form for it because of how good it is, because once you Evo it, it's a 3/3, so we can actually push some good damage. The 3 body also makes it a little bit tougher for Snipe to just end this card's life. But on attack, we deal 1 damage to both leaders, so we're being a little aggressive there, but also hurting ourselves to activate the Sanguine effects that we need. That way you can get the draw at the end phase, draw and discard. A lot of times too, you can do plays where you can play Demonic Hedonist out and then play like Razor Claw to get an extra draw from that if you're getting really close to burning them out that way. And you need to find like the extra burn basically. And then if they don't remove this, the next turn you can Evo, swing in, get another draw, ditch, and so forth to find the burn spell you need. Mini Soul Devil, this card is insanely good. It combos very well. Like if you play this on turn 2 going first and they don't really have an answer for it, the next turn it can push 5 damage by itself, so as long as you have an Evo to go with it the next turn, which you should, since a lot of 2-drops in this deck Evo. This card is criminally busted sometimes, but also sometimes it does just like die to snipe, and aggro attacks running around doesn't mean you can always play this on 2. Usually I'm looking for turns where I can combo this with another follower to evolve on the same turn to get that immediate damage output, and now they have 2 things they have to like get rid of as soon as possible, which I think is really good. A lot of times you're doing this on like turn 2 if you don't have, or sorry, if you're going second, if you don't have like Soul Dealer on 4, doing like a mini Soul Devil into what's it called, Bite, and evoing him is like a pretty decent play overall. Or even the Hedonist. I play a 2 of Trick Dolhan. I used to have this at 3. I didn't like seeing it as much. I think it's stat wise it's pretty good and also generates a ghost, but I felt like Demonic Hedonist was a little bit better because it was another Evo that does activate Mini Soul Devil, and basically has rush essentially when you do Evo it, along with getting you that extra draw. So I kind of valued that more, so you can cycle through your deck like 1 or 2 more extra draws in this deck, because at the end of the day, your game is so quick that getting 1 or 2 extra draws is more than enough to like win out the game. That's why I felt Trick Dolhan wasn't as good as Demonic Hedonist, but I still like the card enough that I felt playing it as a 2 of is pretty important. So Vampire Noble here. This card evos, but it has Strike, Summon a Force Bat. A lot of times we use that Force Bat that we generate off of Strike to pop away using Soul Conversion to get 2 cards. The other thing is we play 2 of the Evo, and then on Evo you get a Force Bat into your EX area, which you can pull out later to combo with your Soul Conversion, which is always very good. Generating extra little bodies on board too is pretty good. If you ever have Vite live for like 2 turns, I feel like At that point, you've kind of started running away with the game, especially if you're able to like swing in with the extra bats and then pop them away with soul conversion to get more gas at that point. I think this card is very, very powerful for a turn 2 play Evo when you go second too. And like your opponent has to deal with it, otherwise your board starts getting a little bit crazy. 3 of Razor Claw. I mean, this is one of the most efficient burn spells we can play in the game, so why aren't we playing it 3 of? Also activates our Sanguine effects when needed. Best 3-drop in the deck by far. If you have a curve of 1, 2, 3 leading into Playful Necromancer, you've probably already won the game at your draw phase, basically, once you see your hand. The Evo form, if you don't remember, is on Evo summon 3 ghost tokens. A lot of times your opponent will try to value trade you and leave some follower up with 1 life left. One of the ghosts can remove that follower, and then 2 can go to face and so forth. It works very well as a control and a aggro card, which is very, very good. Like I said, if you see one of these by turn 3 and you can Evo it going second, I feel like you've probably won the game. If you see a second one after that, you've probably ran away with the game at that point, and you're winning no matter what. Demonic Strike. This is 3 more burn spells. We want to see burn spells. A lot of games end by just casting like Razor Claw, Demonic Strike, and the game's over at that point. You just get your opponent down to roughly 6 life, and it just closes out the game a lot of the times. Burn spells are so important in this because it goes over wards and everything. 2 Phantom Howls. If you don't like Phantom Howl, you can play something like Dark General, which I personally play Dark General in this slot, but I've been going back and forth depending on what is more popular in the meta. For example, if you see a lot more Haven, Phantom Howl is going to be better. If you see like no Haven, personally I like the surprise factor of Dark General, especially if Demonic Hedonist lives a turn, gets a swing in, pings you for 1, then you can Dark General and just ruin someone's day by hitting them for 5 on Storm. Other than that, like Phantom Howl I think is the safer play if you don't know what's going on in your local meta or regional. Phantom Howl will probably do more than Dark General a lot of the times, and like work in some matchups that you might have trouble with. And once again, summoning Ghost and being able to pop the Ghost with Soul Conversion is always good as well. 3 of Cerberus. This card is so good. We've seen it in set 1. A lot of ways you can set up very scary lethal turns by playing Cerberus. On 4, evoing it if they don't remove it, which if they don't remove it, I feel like you've won the game at that point as well. The fact that you get the Mimi and Coco is so powerful. Being able to buff something by 2 or using the Mimi as a control tool. There are some games where you get double Mimi on Evo just because you want to remove one thing on the board so your guys can actually go in for face instead of having to trade followers in. You got to keep that in mind, but usually you want double Coco if you do the Evo, because the +2 damage, especially if you have a ghost sitting in your EX area, so you can bring it out at any time. A lot of times your opponent can't really be greedy and not play things for a turn, anything like that, otherwise they lose the game anyway. So a lot of times your opponent will end up being tapped out, so you can sneak in damage that way when they're forced to tap out basically all their play points for that turn, so you can get in and not have to worry about any quick spells happening. 2 of the Evo, because the card is just too good. Once again, on Evo, you put a Mimi and a Coco instead of picking 1. The 10 Necrocharge on this card can come up occasionally when you start hitting turn 7 and 8. So the one way we can win games once we get past turn 7 is basically activating both of these effects, playing this, getting 2, Evoing it, getting 2 again, and using the control tools of the Mimi to remove things while buffing up for ending the game, which is very powerful. Next, Soul Dealer. This is the big daddy of the deck. This is what I think makes the deck tier 1, essentially. So you play this down on 4 on curve if possible. If your opponent doesn't answer it, you've probably won the game at that point. But putting this on 4 is very hard for your opponent to deal with. A lot of decks have to have a way on 4 to deal with it. Otherwise, they just lose this matchup for free if they don't have an answer for this. What makes it so scary, even though it does 3 damage when it comes into play with the fanfare to yourself, you Evo for 2 on the next turn. We play 2 of the Evo. The Evo destroys something on your opponent's field, which means once you've put this on the board and then you don't remove it, they can't really develop their board anymore, because you just next turn Evo remove the thing that's there. If they put a big ward down, you just remove it. Now you can swing face, which is very scary. But the big thing too is if they develop anything too big and not play around this Evo or removing it before then, You Evo, you not only do you get the 3 health back if they're playing a big creature, you're also healing off of this, which happens a lot more often than you think, because a lot of times people use things like Cudgel or Dragon Warrior, which means once you Evo this, kill the 4/4, you do gain 4 health back, which means you do heal 1 after the whole exchange, and then you get to hit 7 face immediately, which is very, very scary. This card, like I said, I think makes or breaks the deck essentially. If this card isn't in the deck, I don't think it's powerful enough to like win a big tournament outright, because of how swingy this card and how much tempo you gain out of this. Just playing it on the board is just too powerful of a play, in my opinion, especially on 4, and especially if your locals can't really deal with Soul Dealer on 4 that's untapped. You got to make sure too that you don't ward this guy up, because it does have ward. And if you end up warding this, you make it easier for them to remove. So a lot of times when you do play it, you just play it down on a 4, don't engage it, so they can't target it with their followers and crash things into it to remove it. They have to either use a spell or some combination of, like, if you're against like Sword, for example, they have to play Swordsman down to force it to be engaged so they can start running things into it, because a lot of times Sword doesn't have very good answers to a 6/5 that is not engaged. But yeah, so this deck is incredibly aggressive. I mean, I assume you guys can tell. I've been enjoying this list a lot. A lot of my games end on turn 5 and 6, depending on how bad my opponent's draws are. A lot of times, if your opponent has to pass 2 turns that early, they've lost the game. Another great thing about this deck is that the curve is so low. Almost any 4 random cards in this deck is a good enough hand to be playing. Honestly, like, skipping turn 1 feels kind of bad sometimes, but even just going into turn 2 and then evoing Vite is just good enough to like still put the pressure onto your opponent that way. The deck is incredibly quick. Like I said, games in usually between turns 6 and 7 is the latest. A lot of games, I would say probably about like 40% of my games end on turn 5, especially when my opponent doesn't open very well, which does happen with some people who try to be greedy. I think one thing too, right now, I think Abyss is highly underrated by a lot of people, or like kind of written off because the aggro tax is going around. One thing I've noticed at regionals is that there's so little Abyss going around, and not every deck is like, paying the tax up for Abyss currently. So I think if you show up with like a list like this to a regional, you could probably sweep a lot of people, not anticipating just losing the game on turn 4 or 5 even, which is insane to me. I think people should be on the lookout for this deck, because I feel like before Worlds, we're going to see one of these Aggro Abyss lists top very easily. And honestly, I think in a small event like how we're having at regionals right now, Aggro Abyss is even more likely to top, because they don't have to coin flip as many times against matchups that are more 50-50, like for example into Dragon. Dragon is a pretty 50-50 matchup if they open up early stuff, but if they miss a turn or 2 early game, Dragon's a free W for you basically. So yeah, if you've been looking at Abyss and been thinking about playing Aggro Abyss, try this list. Tell me how you like it. I know you're going to love it if you love playing aggro. It does require some finesse sometimes, but honestly, half the time you can play brain dead. The other half, you got to kind of play smarter depending how your opponent opens. But the fact that you don't have to put as much brain power into your games because they end sooner, you get more rest time between rounds, is always really good. So you can like revitalize yourself and get into the next round being with a clear head and ready to go, basically. I think those are huge advantages for Abyss aggro. But yeah, besides that, guys, I see you guys in the next video. Later.